Hello there, my name is Elaine and I'm coming to you from the centre of Ireland. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this patchwork quilted coaster. Some people call them mugrugs. The materials you need will be in the description below the video, and I really hope you enjoy making this with me today. So to create our patchwork quilted coaster today, apart from a sewing machine and an iron, we'll need a 5.5 inch square of cotton fabric. It's a 1/2 inch larger than our finished coaster to allow for seam allowance. A 5.5 inch square of Insul-brite. You could also use some cotton batting, a couple of layers. 4 3-inch squares of cotton fabric. I'm using 2 contrasting fabrics for the checkerboard effect I'm trying to create. Some clips or pins, a ruler to mark our quilting lines on the exterior of the coaster, a fabric marker to mark those quilting lines, a point turner to poke out our corners, scissors to clip our corners, a 1/4 inch foot on your sewing machine would be very helpful for accuracy in the patchwork we're creating today. And I just have a pin, it's a quilting pin, curved. It will help to keep all layers together in the center of my coaster when I'm sewing. So now I'm going to pin the 2 contrasting fabrics together, and I'm going to take them to my sewing machine. So I'm all set up here to sew my patchwork squares together. My machine stitch length is quite small. It's a 1.8. I have my 1/4 inch foot installed for accuracy. I've taken a few stitches on my scrap piece of fabric to eliminate nesting on the back of my seams. So I'm just going to drop my needle and sew. Coming up to a pin, take that out of the way. And I'm going to chain piece, which means I'm just going to put the other set of squares up against the previous one and start sewing, which will eliminate thread wastage, or reduce thread wastage I should say. Now I'm going to snip these, snip the threads, and now I'm going to press these. So I'm just going to press the seam I've just sewed open up, so I'm seeing the exterior of the fabric, and I am going to press towards the green fabric, or press the seam towards the green fabric, and the same on the other one. So I'm going to get my iron right in there, so it's pressed really open. And now I'm going to pin these together. So in this format, the green and opposite sides, turn them over, and I'm just going to butt up those seams together, just using my fingers so there's no gaps. No gaps there. They're butted right up together, and then I'm going to pin them, but not on the seam, to the left and right of the seam. I used to pin them down the center, but it never worked out great for me, and now I pin them to the side of the seam and it holds it together better. Another pin here, and then another a bit further down. Now back to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to sew along this side here. So my machine is obviously still the same configuration. I haven't changed anything. So my needle is dropped. Take out this pin here, and I'm just kind of keeping my fingers on this seam so nothing moves. Now, so there we are, perfect. I'm really happy with how that's nested together so well. So now I'm going to get my iron again. And again, I'm just going to set those threads, set that seam. I'm going to open it up, but this time on the back, I'm actually going to press this seam open for a flatter coaster. If I left it all over to one side, it would be bulky. So I am just going to use my fingers to hold that open. And there we go, our beautiful patchwork top for our coaster. So let's make a sandwich, a quilt sandwich, unfortunately. So I have my layer of Insul-brite. That's going to be on the bottom. I'm going to take my cotton fabric, the full piece, and I'm going to lay that on the Insul-brite with the right side facing up. I'm going to take our patchwork piece, and that's going to be right sides facing down. So both our cottons are facing each other, right sides facing. I'm going to take clips initially and just clip where we have seams from the patchwork piece we've just sewn. And now, before I pin any further, I'm going to decide where I'm going to leave my turning gap. So we need to leave about 1.5 inches of a turning gap, and I would recommend you leave it in a straight piece of fabric, not over a seam which could become frayed. So I'm just going to mark it here about 1.5 inches, and I am going to pin this all the way around. More pins are required. I am going to take it to my sewing machine. I'm going to start here, and using 1/4 inch seam allowance, I am going to backstitch a couple of times just to strengthen our turning gap. 1/4 inch all the way around, and I'm going to stop here at this other mark and backstitch a good few times, just reinforce that, so when we're turning out our coaster, our turning gap stays at 1.5 inches. And I would, you know, if you would like a more detailed demonstration, I would check out my bookmark tutorial. It's my previous video, my first YouTube video, and that goes into a lot more detail at the sewing machine, you know, at this stage of construction of a similar item. So our quilt sandwich is sewn, and all that's left to do now before we turn it out is to trim the batting or Insul-brite and clip the corners. I've already trimmed 3 sides of the Insul-brite, and I'll just show you my technique for trimming it back. So I just hold the fabric to one side and then just get my scissors, and careful not to clip your seams, and just trim it back as close as you can. It's a little bit fiddly, but it is worth it for the bulk that it reduces when you're doing your top stitching. And now I'm going to clip my corners. Again, as near as you can without going through the seams. This makes an amazing difference in the neatness of your fabric coaster. Sorry, this one is a bit fiddly. There we go. So now I'm just going to put my fingers in to my turning gap, and I'm going between the 2 layers of the cotton fabric, and I'm going to reach down to the far corner and, you know, try and bring that through first. I have it here, and then just take your time and gently pull it through. And it's coming. That's why it's so important to reinforce your stitches. Now, so initially, I'm just going to get my fingers in along those seams and poke it out as much as I can. And then I'm going to use my point turner. You could use a big biro, a chopstick, whatever you have on hand, just nothing too sharp that will go through your stitching. The final corner here. Now, if you have some water or spray starch, you can see it's quite wrinkled there from the turning out process. Just give it a little spray. And I initially just, you can see I'm rolling over those seams there, and just get my iron in here before I flatten it totally. I don't know why it works, but it does work to do this step. And then for our turning gap, just turn that under by roughly the 1/4 inch seam. And then just press. The longer you spend on this step, the nicer your coaster is going to be. Just roll them again slightly. Now I'm just going to double check this here. I think it needs a little bit more to be turned under. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to get a pin there. And do you remember the curved quilting pin? Now I have it all nice and flat. I don't want it to shift. So I'm just going to put it into the center here, just to keep all those layers from shifting. You can see it's all nice there, and that will hold it. And just a couple more pins around, just to make sure. Now, so the next step is to take this back to the sewing machine and sew an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. I would use a larger stitch length than in the previous piecing stage. I would do a 3, you know, depending on your machine, but a 3 works for me. We're using 1/8 of an inch because we still have the turning gap to seal in, and that's a 1/4 of an inch of a seam there. So if you made the top stitching any bigger, say if you did use a 1/4 of an inch, you risk not catching that turning gap, and then you'll have a hole. So I am going back to the sewing machine to complete the top stitching. So I'm after top stitching around the coaster on the outside, and I've used a water soluble fabric pen to mark my quilting lines on my coaster. I like this design because it covers most of the coaster, and you only have to backstitch at the beginning and at the end. And what I've done is I've marked 3/4 of an inch out here and extended it, and the common denominator is coming around in 3/4 of an inch in a kind of a maze effect, and to the finish here. You could use other designs. You could do a circle if you wanted to, you know, with a similar distance between the quilting lines. You could use cross hatch using the 45-degree angle on your ruler, but just be aware of, you know, having to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and the more isolated lines you draw, the more of the backstitching you'll have to do on this coaster. So I have my machine ready to go. I've increased my stitch length. It's at a 3. I actually have my walking foot on because of the layers and the batting in between, and the walking foot will help to keep all the layers together and reduce shifting. But I have used a normal foot before, and it works. It can be done. So here we go, starting at my start of my maze, as I like to call it. I'm going to back stitch. A couple of times there I back stitch, and just roughly I'm just going to follow these lines. And just take your time with a walking foot. It doesn't like if you put your foot on the pedal and try to go too fast. Now we're at the end here now, and I'm just going to back stitch a couple of times here just to make sure my stitches don't unravel. Now I'm going to lift my needle and get my little embroidery scissors here now. It's very useful for cutting top stitch threads. It gets very close. Now I still have the fabric marker here in blue, you can see, but a spray of water and that will all disappear. But I'm really happy with how this turned out. Wow, we made it to the end, and look what we have, a lovely quilted coaster. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I like making them. So please subscribe to my channel, give the video a like, and I'll see you next time.